Everybody remembers Black Ops 1. All the good times spent playing one of the best COD games to have ever come out. The holy trifecta that is Black Ops 1's game modes, the multiplayer, zombies, and especially the campaign. You see, this campaign is special. Even more special than the multiplayer and zombies, in my eyes at least. The multiplayer and zombies are incredible, but I always found myself replaying this campaign when I got tired of getting shitted on by sweats in multiplayer, or slapped by zombies. I probably played this campaign at least 30 times, every mission being ingrained in my mind. I still see the numbers from time to time. Guess I'm never shaking that off. There's something really remarkable with BO1's campaign that other COD games have yet to replicate. The heart and soul of BO1's campaign is unmatchable. Now sit back and relax and let me remind you, or introduce to you, why Black Ops 1's campaign is historic. The beginning starts with our protagonist, Mason, tied up in a chair with TVs all around him. Also with two guys behind a window asking questions and interrogating him. Seems like a typical Tuesday if you ask me. They start asking him about where the broadcast station is, what do the numbers mean, and who is Dragovich. If he doesn't answer, then he gets a little shock, like a bad puppy. We then get transported to a flashback of a mission in the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, learning that this mission was about infiltrating Fidel Castro's home and killing him. And man, the intro to this mission is just so memorable, with the screen being pitch black until we see the light of a lighter light up the screen. Light. And then we get the introduction of Woods and Bowman. Woods being one of the most goddamn best side characters to have ever been introduced in any game, and Bowman being Ice Cube. We see this claim solidify as Woods puts a knife through this fine Cuban's hand and smashes his skull with a Coors Light. Shit goes south as our bartender throws us an M16. They then battle their way through the mean streets of Cuba, making their way to a car, which they use to escape the Federales. One slow motion crash scene later, and we cut back to Mason fading out like he just drank purple Kool-Aid. These fine interrogators then administer their patient with a little gum shock, which brings Mason back to his senses and recalls more of his mission to Cuba. We see that Mason, Woods, and Bowman infiltrate Castro's private domicile and fight their way through his mansion. Not one, but two slow motion scenes when going through his mansion, like they're fighting their way through the Matrix, with the second one being the kill shot to stop this mad communist, or so they think. After that little fiasco, they fight their way out of his home and through his little ranch to make their way to a cargo plane. With this being a Call of Duty game, something goes wrong and they can't take off due to vehicles blocking the runway, so Mason jumps out the plane and makes his way to a cannon that's just off the side, clearing the path for his comrades, and they're able to take off successfully. With Mason being left behind, he immediately gets knocked out and kidnapped, waking up and seeing the league of supervillains before him, Fidel Castro, who is alive, and telling Mason he killed a body double. The other two being Russians named Dragovich and Grevchenko, with Dragovich getting up close and personal, telling Mason that he has a plan for this sexy American. And that was Mission 1. Talk about something being memorable, but Mission 2 is just as great. We learned that Dragovich took Mason to Russia in a labor camp named Vorkuta. What a lovely name for the gulag. Mason wakes up being pummeled on by this mustachioed man, being the one and only Viktor Reznov. He throws one back, which alerts the guard to come to their direction with a beating stick in hand. He then starts beating Reznov, which gives Mason the chance to hit him with his back turned. Reznov then shouts the iconic phrase, "Is step 1! Step 2 being ascend from darkness, just like Batman. With the help of Reznov and the other Russian prisoners, they fight their way out of the gulag and continue on with the steps of the plan. They open the big red doors to immediately get fired on and die. As Reznov said, there must be sacrifice after all. They both get behind this large coal minecart, and with the help of their large friend Sergey, they're able to push their way up to the tower, breaking in and securing some real weapons. Mason then goes up to the top and starts shooting some rocks with fire on the officers. All those years playing Angry Birds with Reznov finally paid off. With step 4 being complete, all that leaves is step 5, skewer the winged beast. They fight their way through the compound, and Mason again is left with the hard part, shooting the winged beast with a harpoon shotgun. It crashes to a building. At last they make their way to the armory, but with the sacrifice of Sergey, poor guy, they're at step 6, wield a fist of iron, a big ass minigun, which Mason must raise hell upon. Also step 7. But these Russians have some Soviet tear gas up their sleeve, which they use to discombobulate the iron fist wielder Mason. He goes down to the ground and suffocates from the Soviet juices, but Reznov comes marching in, already used to the sweet motherland juice, and rescues him. Reznov brought Mason to a Harley Davidson store with 2 motorcycles waiting for them. Finally comes the 8th and final step, freedom. They use these motorcycles and a shotgun to drive their way to a train called Freedom. They hijack a truck with a mounted turret on the back and use it to take out the remaining Russian officers coming after them. After a long battle, Mason jumps on the train and looks back for Reznov to jump on, but he says to him, "You, Mason! Not for me! Reznov!" And he drives away. A true hero's getaway and the end of the mission. Now, the next mission is a little less intense, or more intense, depending on how you see it. Mason has to go inside the Pentagon and speak to one Jonathan Fitzgerald Kennedy. But first, we get introduced to Mason's new handler, Jason Hudson, a stone-cold, badass, bald, sunglasses-wearing individual. He leads the way to the limo that is awaiting Mason and himself. Mason shakes hands with Secretary McNamara. They all then get an escort to the Pentagon. McNamara hands Mason these highly classified documents of Dragovich, showing him who his next target is. We then get these badass camera angles of the limo they're driving in. Mason schizoing out, saying how he felt that everyone in that building is watching him, which his accusation was confirmed, as his baddie was watching him walk in. They walk all the way through the 5 map. Hey, there's a teleporter. Mason takes a seat and awaits the president. Everything's going crazy as JFK comes to his direction. JFK saying, "Dragovich," is something I never thought I'd hear, and I guess Mason too, as he points a Glock on him. But it was just one of Mason's good old hallucinations. JFK tells him to take care of this Dragovich fellow, and with that, the Pentagon visit is over. One Ascension game later, and we're in Vietnam. Woods comes down on a helicopter as Fortunate Son plays in the background. If this doesn't get you immersed in Nam, then nothing will. Woods looks like a hammer and shit to Mason, but as Woods says, this is Nam, baby. Hudson introduces himself, but Woods don't take too kindly to CIA boys, wearing sunglasses in Vietnam, by the way. As Woods briefs them on what's going on, Mr. Slim Jim driver almost crashes into a wing, and they swerve off the road. We finally see Hudson without his shades on, and they both drag him to safety. Mason lifts him and brings him to the nearest M16, which regenerates his health. All 3 of them go through the trenches and take out as many Viet Congs as they see. Mason gets jumped and taken for all his money, but this man's grenade has something to say about it. They keep moving forward, and Mason is tasked with taking out 3 Russian tanks, which he does so successfully. As they battle up the hill, an explosion rocks Mason, and he sees Woods try to shoot this fellow as his back was turned, but his gun says no, and he gets slapped. Mason comes in with the rescue as he pulls out a revolver and handles the individual. Bowman takes the Woods entrance as he shows up in a helicopter. He says Mason looks like a hammer and shit, which Mason replies with, "Well, nah, I'ma do that to you." Hudson gets ignored, and they all enjoy Vietnam together. After Vietnam, Hudson makes a fun trip to China. He's tasked with interrogating a man by the name of Daniel Clark, the chemical engineer who helped formulate Nova 6. Nova 6 being the be-all end-all biochemical weapon that could take out any nation with a drop. Right off the bat, Dr. Clark is tied up in a chair and insisting on eating glass, which Hudson obliges him with. There's nothing sweeter than the taste of blood. After his sweet snack, Dr. Clark informs them that he's already being hunted by Dragovich, and if they already found him, then Dragovich and his men are on their way now. Clark also tells them that he was the one who stabilized Nova 6. Right as he does, Dragovich's men come to interrupt the party. So Weaver, Hudson, and the doctor have to fight their way out, jumping from rooftop to rooftop in this beautiful ray-traced rainy city. But with rain comes pain. Dr. Clark slips off the roof with Hudson holding one of his hands. It's very romantic, but the moment's cut short as Clark's brain matter decides to make an appearance, right as he was about to say what the numbers mean. Hudson lets go of his lover as himself and Weaver need to leave, and they escape China. The following mission, Mason reflects on a conversation that he had with Reznov when they're in the Gulag. Reznov explains to Mason why Dragovich, Steiner, Kravchenko all must die. It all dates back to World War II. Reznov states that any Russian caught working with a Nazi was a betrayal against all of Mother Russia. But both Dragovich and Kravchenko don't care what Mother thinks. We get transported to World War II as Reznov takes the lead. Kravchenko, who looks like a scuffed Niko Bellic, teases Reznov as he mentions Berlin. Dragovich informs his men on what the objective is, to capture one Dr. Friedrich Steiner. He explicitly explains that Steiner is to be captured alive, and any man who disobeys this order will get shot for the glory. Reznov hops on the truck. One of the men asks what happened in Stalingrad between Reznov and Dragovich. Reznov reveals that he left him and his men outnumbered by the Germans, promised that reinforcements would come, but they never did. One Skyrim intro later, and they're fighting Germans at a nippy hideout. As they plow their way through the hideout, they make their way to Steiner's container. Steiner demands to be taken to Dragovich, which he is then taken to. They both talk as though they've been best friends, sending each other postcards throughout the war. Dragovich wants his men to infiltrate this broken ship, hoping to find something of value inside. Frederick describes how the hitman Lur realized that the Allies could not be held back, so they were looking for a more unconventional solution. He was tasked with making a chemical weapon, which you could probably guess is Nova 6. So they make their way inside the ship trying to locate Nova 6. Things get spooky as we see frozen dead bodies and bad lighting. They open the valve door and they find it. Russia now had the weapon of mass destruction in their hands, or so they thought. Dragovich wanted to see the effects of the poison firsthand, so he asked his men kindly to step inside the gas chamber and be exposed to it, which we see them do, and how Nova 6 affects the body, turning them to raisins. Yummy. After that fiasco, the British came to take the biochemical, which left a perfect opportunity for Reznov to escape the ship and make a run for it. He planted explosives on his way out and watched as the ship crumbled to the ice. And with that, the end of Reznov's tale. We go back to Hudson as he sneaks his way through the Russian mountains. The goal is to get information on a military complex that the Russians had. We see someone go inside a special grade military jet and take off. The man on the jet is tasked to take care of Hudson and his men as they make their way through the complex. It goes from Jet Man to Hudson Man as he needs to eliminate any men in his way. They make their way to the military complex and repel their way inside, SWAT style, breaking through the window and killing the men inside. They work their way down the station, utilizing a crossbow, and they find themselves inside the main control room. Hudson doesn't like wires, so he breaks the two that were bothering him, cutting the communications between the Russians. They didn't like that, so they shot an RPG at the bridge he was walking on, creating an avalanche. Hudson and his team all sprint their way down and jump off the mountain with their flying squirrel suits and parachute safely. They fight their way inside another building, this time containing key targets to hit of the US. These targets are sleeper cells, waiting for the signal to release Nova 6. Steiner interrupts the radio they're using and tells them they could find him at Rebirth Island, so hop on Warzone I guess. They make their getaway as the mountain is rigged to explode, marking the end of the mission. We go back to Mason as he recalls his Vietnam days, being trapped like a rat with Woods and Bowman, forced to play the fun for the whole family game, Russian roulette. But first, Bowman gets a smack to the back of the head, which puts him to sleep. This ice cube has melted. They then grab Woods and they both play the game. Woods goes first and pulls the trigger. He lost as the bullet didn't come out. What a loser. Mason's up next. He doesn't know how to play the game and ends up letting the referee take the bullet and win the game. They take the AKs and make an escape out of the cave. They chase down the man that turned Bowman into Deadman. Mason executes him and they leave the smelly cave. They find a helicopter and hijack it, using it against the Viet Cong and to make their way to Kravchenko's compound. They land and make their way inside, freeing up some POWs, and Reznov comes walking out the door. They must kill Kravchenko. Woods, Mason, and Reznov all fight their way up to Kravchenko's hideout, finding him inside with a chair in his hand. Woods comes in for the save but gets overpowered by Russian steel. He comes over to Mason and starts beating him, saying how he should have killed him in Vorkuta. But as he does, Woods comes in with a knife to the back and they jump out the window, blowing up. Was that the end of Woods? Reznov comes helping Mason up to his feet, saying how they all must die. Mason has to go pay Steiner a little visit, and he does as he drops into Rebirth Island with his duo partner, Reznov. They're hiding in the back of a truck full of monkeys. Mason and Reznov sneak their way inside the facility that Steiner is in, with Reznov giving all the orders, and eventually they find the mad scientist. Mason and Reznov confront Mr. Frederick, and Reznov tells him that his days are numbered, telling him to remember his name, and points a gun and shoots him. Or so we think. 20 minutes earlier, Hudson and Weaver made their way into Rebirth Island, retelling their version of events. In it, they came in with tanks and hazmat suits. They're not fucking around. The tanks combust and they're all exposed to the elements of Nova 6. Hudson utilizes his thermal sights and works his way to the lab station. They figure out that Mason came in and raised hell trying to get to Steiner. When they do find Steiner and Mason, they're reenacting Reznov's favorite movie, Death to Steiner. Mason was the one who killed Steiner. Reznov was never with Mason. Pipe bomb dropped.
What did they do to you in Vorkuta, Mason?
We go back to the interrogation room, finding out that time is running out. The only person that could stop the sleeper cells is Mason. He's the only one that could lead him to the broadcast station. All Mason has to do is understand the numbers. The mysterious man behind the screen finally reveals himself. It's no one else but Mr. Sunglasses, Jason Hudson, and oh yeah, Weaver too. He comes closer to Mason and starts shaking him, telling him why doesn't he remember the numbers. Mason didn't like the shakes, so he shakes his fist at Hudson's face. Mason books it out of the interrogation room. All he hears are numbers and distorted voices as he makes his leave. We find out that Mason was brainwashed by Dragovich and Steiner to translate the number sequences, but that he won't take orders due to being remarkably resilient. Mason makes his way to the presentation room where he sees a creepypasta version of Reznov on the screen. He leaves and his whole world is coming apart in these trippy visuals, but he gets punched back into reality by Hudson. He remembers what Reznov did to him. He was never with Mason on any of the missions. He implanted himself inside Mason. Reznov's true goal was revenge. Dragovich, Steiner, Kravchenko all must die. He died 5 years prior during the escape of Vorkuta. Hudson pleads one last time for Mason to remember the numbers. In the deep mind of Alex Mason, he finally cracks the number sequences. He finally remembers where the broadcast station is. It's a ship named the Rusalka, located in Cuba. Hudson says, and they're off. The final mission. It's time to stop World War III from happening. The boys fly in via helicopter to the ship. They use the turrets to destroy key targets. They then hop on board, crash landing style. Hudson and Mason make their way through the ship trying to locate the number transmitter. Weaver went in first to find it, but gets pinned down by Dragovich's men. They both make their way to Weaver to help him out. They all confirm that this ship is indeed the broadcast station and to bring in the airstrike to blow this puppy up. But first, Mason's got to make sure that Dragovich is dead before anything happens. So both Hudson and Mason go underwater where the number station is and where Dragovich is hiding. They infiltrate in and have to fight against the clock. This underwater base has a breach in it and it's slowly getting submerged with water. They make their way through every room trying to locate this son of a bitch, and eventually they find him. Right as the whole place is about to go under, Dragovich makes his appearance. Mason drags him down with him and they play a game of who can inhale water the longest, and Dragovich wins. Hudson and Mason make a swim for it to the surface. When they reach the top, they're greeted with a job well done. They saved America. What's this? An end credit scene. There's a woman speaking numbers through a microphone, and we see an old camera film of JFK. He makes his way inside his famous roofless limo, surrounded by many people, but one sticks out on the tape. Is that? It couldn't be. Oh my god! Alex Mason in real life? The end. I love this campaign. There's something so special to it. From beginning to end, this campaign hooks you and never lets you go. There's so much about it that I adore. The setting, mainly taking place in the 60s during the Vietnam War, but it does take us to different points in time, occasionally. The setting choice for this game could not have been any more perfect. Every mission is so distinct and memorable. There's none that's forgettable, which is just incredible. We go from Bay of Pigs, Cuba, to going to the Pentagon, to going to Vietnam, to going to World War II, to going to the goddamn rainy rooftops of China. This campaign takes us everywhere, and it still holds up surprisingly well, despite this game being 14 years old. The balls this game had too. I don't think there's any other COD game that can match the amount of balls BR1 had. The first mission literally had us kill goddamn Fidel Castro, even if it may have been a lookalike. The third mission had us meet JFK and hallucinate pointing a gun at him. Like, what could even top that? Oh well, maybe implying that Alex fucking Mason was the second gunman that killed JFK. I think that's a pretty good top. Just incredible they had the balls to do that. Makes it so much more impactful. Also, the little details they add during missions, such as hearing and seeing numbers whenever Reznov appears during a mission. He can't even be shot at by enemies when he's in a mission. He has God mode turned on. No other characters even mention him either. He's strictly all in Mason's mind. The short briefs we get before going into a mission are just wonderful as well. Utilizing real life footage in this fake story makes it feel as though maybe it is just real. The way they edited it too, making it all sporadic and unstable, gives you the sense of urgency. There's always numbers sprinkled about in it. Also, shout out to Sean Murray for delivering a great OST. The campaign soundtrack is so great. Go back and check it out if you haven't. Let me talk about the characters for a second. Woods, one of the most badass and legendary characters ever. There's such a presence about him. Also helping out Mason to the bitter end, looking like a more roughed up Joel from The Last of Us. His voice actor kills this role. It's a shame he wasn't able to reprise his role in other COD games. Victor Reznov. I mean, what's there to say that hasn't already been said about the man? That reveal that Reznov was never with Mason after Vorkuta and that he reprogrammed Mason to kill his 3 worst enemies, immaculate. Also being voiced by a big time Hollywood actor, Gary Oldman, you know, Commissioner Gordon from Batman. I didn't even know that until making this video. He killed the role as Reznov. Also Bowman being played by Ice Cube too surprised me. Then there's the main protagonist, Alex Mason, who you could really feel the agony when he's being tortured. His voice actor sells the sound of pain well. He's in so much pain due to the amount of brainwashing he's been through. Take him out of the rent cycle already, man. All the villains, Dragovich, Kravchenko, Steiner, maybe a tad forgettable, they still did a good job with the roles. And finally, the badass man with sunglasses, Jason Hudson. I think his voice is my favorite in this game. He sounds so stoic when he talks. When Hudson's talking, you're listening, unless you're Woods. With all that being said, Black Ops 1's campaign is truly historic. Peace out, have fun, and leave a like and subscribe if you got numbers in your head.